Today, I'm going to show you how to make a super simple zombie spawner that whenever we actually run into this little green area, it spawns 6 zombies for us, and they will run and attack you. So first of all we're actually going to need for this is just some sort of area that we can use for a player to walk into in order for these to spawn. So I simply just have this singular part that has no special properties to it. All it is I've just whacked down the transparency a little bit, and also I've turned off can collide so that the player can actually walk through it. Oh, and also make sure it's anchored as well. Next, we actually need spawn points for our zombies. So you can actually choose how many zombies you want to spawn in a specific area, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. So first of all, start off by adding a part. You can scale this however you want, it doesn't really matter. Make sure it's anchored, and all we're going to do is actually just bring it up. Make sure it is up. That's the main thing, sort of above player height almost. You just want to make sure that you've brought it up enough height that it won't glitch the zombies through the floor whenever they spawn, because they're going to be spawning relative to the position of this part. So now I'm going to just quickly change the transparency to 1 so it's invisible, and make sure can collide is turned off so they can actually phase through it. We're just going to come up here and rename our part spawn point. And now this is where it's fully customizable. You can choose exactly how many zombies you want to spawn. So 1 spawn point will be 1 zombie. So for example, I want 5 zombies to spawn. So I'm going to duplicate this 4 more times. So I'm going to hold Control D to duplicate, and I'm going to just drag it out a little bit so it's a little bit further away from our last one. Control D again, I'm going to drag it out a little bit more so it's further away from the rest of them again. And then I'm just going to select all 3, Control D, and duplicate them all. So just to quickly show you what I've done, I'm just going to select all of our spawn points and just put the transparency back down. So you can see this is exactly where I've placed them. It's very, very important that you make sure they're up higher in the air so that the zombies don't actually clip through the floor. So I'm just going to put the transparency back up so they're invisible. And what you can do now is once you've selected all of them, don't select your button, but just make sure you've got all of your spawn points selected. You can do that by control clicking. You just want to right click on it and group as a model. We're going to call this model spawn collection, and then we can actually start scripting. But before that, we actually need a zombie. We need something that we actually want to spawn on these points. I don't have the time to actually make a zombie, so I'm just going to head into the toolbox. I'm going to search up zombie, and I'm just going to use this first one here provided by Roblox. So just drag it into your workspace, click OK on the scripts, close your toolbox, and then just rename it something like zombie. Then you're just going to drag it into our replicated storage, and then finally we can actually start scripting. So this script is going to lie in our spawn button or our spawn area. So we're just going to click the little white plus, add a script. I'm going to call it zombie spawner and delete the default text. So first of all, we actually need to get our button. So we're going to say local button equals script.parent, and we need to get our spawn collection so we can get all our spawn points. Local spawn collection equals workspace.spawn collection, and then we also need to make a debounce variable, which is basically going to allow us to have a cooldown between the times that the player actually touches the area, because we don't want it to spawn 30 times in the time that the player actually touches the button. We just want it to spawn once every 5 seconds for every time that the player is actually touching it. We're actually going to make this a boolean value. We're going to say local debounce equals false, and then finally we need to actually get our zombie. We're going to say local zombie equals game get service replicated storage wait for child zombie. Okay, so now we can actually start working on our function, which was going to detect whenever a player is standing inside the area that we want it to spawn in. So we're going to say button.touched connect function, and then hit in the parameters because we want to be able to read the values that actually come from whenever the player hits it. And we're going to say local player equals game.players get player from character hit.parent. So what this is essentially doing is we're checking to see what has actually hit this button, and we're going to see, is it a player using the get player from character, and hit.parent is always going to return the actual character, because hit could be the right leg, it could be the right arm, it could be the head, whatever has actually hit this, we need to get the parent of it, which will be our character. So we're just going to say if player and not debounce, then, so what we're saying is if it is the player who's touched it and debounce equals false, that's what not debounce means, then we're going to say debounce equals true, so it won't fire again. And then we actually need to utilize our for loops. Now I've covered these in past videos, but basically what a for loop is, we're iterating over every single child in a certain collection. And then for every child in that collection, we're doing something. So in our case, we want to iterate over every spawn point in here and spawn a zombie on each of these different spawn points. So we're going to start it off by saying for I spawn point in spawn collection get children do. So what we're doing here is we're saying for every spawn point in spawn collection get children. So get children essentially means we're getting an array of everything that is in this model. And then we actually need to set up our zombie. So we're actually going to use the clone function, which basically lets us duplicate something from another service, such as our zombie up here, which is stored in replicated storage. We just want to duplicate it, set it to workspace, give it the position of our spawn points. So we're going to say local new zombie equals zombie colon clone. So now we've duplicated our zombie, but it's always going to be in the replicated storage unless we set its parent to something else. So we need to set our parent to the workspace. So we're going to say new zombie dot parent equals workspace. Then we actually need to change the position of the zombie to whoever we want it to be. So we're going to say local pos, which stands for position, equals spawn point dot c frame. Now that may seem a little unfamiliar to you, but I promise it's a lot easier and I'm going to go through it now. So when we get in the position of something, we're calling the C frame. And the reason we're calling the C frame is that if we were actually to say position, it will return a vector 3 value. So the two position values in Roblox that are used is a C frame and a vector 3. Now a vector 3 is not used for rotation, whereas a C frame is more versatile in that way, and you can basically say, I want it to face this way, I want it to do that, and it has a lot more different properties than vector 3 does. So that's what position returns. If we do C frame, that is more of a precise location as to where we want our spawn point, and it's just a lot more reliable in general. And a lot of times we want to be using C frame, and I'll show you another reason why we want to be using C frame as well instead of position, which is with the next line, which is going to be new zombie colon set primary part C frame pos. Now you're probably looking at that and wondering what on earth does any of that mean. So the reason that we're saying set primary part C frame is because when we're actually dealing with models, you can't change the C frame of a model. You can see that if I click on the spawn point and we go on C frame, we can change position, orientation, we can change the orange, we can change everything. But when we actually go on our zombie model, there's none of that. All we have is the origin position and orientation. Now, origin is completely different. This is basically where it originally was, but it doesn't change its active position. So that's why we need to use set primary part C frame, which is another thing we need to do. We actually need to set a primary part down here. Now, this is really, really important. Whenever you're using models, you need to set a primary part. And what that essentially means is that this model C frame is always going to be relative to whatever part we choose here to be the primary part. So for sort of things like this, you kind of want to go for something that's in the center. So a humanoid root part is always in the center of a humanoid. So we're going to set this to be our primary part because it's the most reliable. So we're going to go on our zombie and we're going to click on primary part, and then all you're going to do is just click on humanoid root part. So now what that basically means is whenever we move our humanoid root part in our workspace, our whole zombie will move with it. It's kind of like it's parented to the humanoid root part. So the reason we're calling this set primary part C frame is we're saying we want the C frame of the primary part to match this position. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. And then we can head outside of our function, and all we're going to say is wait 5 and then debounce equals false. And then all that does is lets us have a nice cooldown so that the player isn't going to be constantly spawning things and just ruining the server's performance. Okay, so that should actually work now. If we head into our game, and we can test it out by simply running in it, and you can see that a lot of zombies spawn, which is exactly what we want. And now if we head back in it, after 5 seconds, you can see more spawn, but if I'm jumping around, it's not happening again. But as soon as that 5 seconds up, you can see the more spawn. Now, this free zombie model is not very good because they're all attacking each other, but by doing this, I'd assume that you'd already have a different zombie model that you'd be using instead of these weird things that just like to kill each other. They don't seem very good, but I was just using this as sort of demonstration purposes. You can actually use this to spawn anything in at all. It doesn't have to be a zombie. It could be like meteors or something, or anything at all. But yeah, that's it for this tutorial. I hope it helped. If you have any comments or concerns, please leave them in the comment section below. We also have a Discord you can join where you can get the free resources. I'll be leaving this entire code system in the free resources page of my Discord server. Make sure to also join the group as well. If you're in the Discord and the group, you get a nice little role. But anyway, that's it. I will see you all later.